This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another edition of Making Mount Rushmore here on the PTB Pop Experience. I am your host slash moderator slash panelist for this episode, Steve Riddle, and we got a pretty good episode for today. We are continuing my little trek here that I've been doing this year of the what I call the underrated, overrated series. We, of course, have already done underrated, overrated songs and musicians. Now we're going to be hitting the big screen and talking underrated and overrated films and franchises. And I got a great pair of gentlemen to help me out with that. First, let me bring in, he was on with me last month to talk East Coast and West Coast rap songs. So glad to have him back again. He's, of course, one half of the Wrestling War Zone over on the North-South Connection feed on both podcast form and YouTube form. It is Mr. Chad Campbell. Chad, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Steve. Happy to be back again this month. Little nervous. I think this may be where I turn heel for some people when I get to my overrated list, but we'll see. Even some of my podcast co-hosts. So there we go.
Yeah, we might be making a lot of enemies here with this podcast, this episode. So we might have to be treading lightly with here. But let's also bring in another guest. He's been on before. It's been a while for him, but I'm glad to have him back. He also can be found on the North-South Connection as part of Chronoso, as well as his own show, The Multiverse of Fabulousness, along with Keith Langston. It is Mr. Jonnie Sea. Johnny, how are you, sir?
Steve, I'm doing well, and unlike Chad, I've been waiting to turn heel for some time now. But I'm going to be a heel that also believes that he's right and proves that he's right, because I'm ready to throw some movies under the bus.
So you're basically going to be the Bret Hart circa 97 of this episode.
Okay, I'd never want to be compared to Bret Hart again. But I appreciate the compliment, because at least heel Bret Hart 97 was pretty cool.
Well, Tim Cable, he would have been more accepting of that, but okay. But let's go ahead and get started. As I said, we are of course talking films and franchises for our underrated and overrated. And of course, we will start with the underrated. These films and franchises that we think don't get the love that they should from other audiences. We got some good discussion that I think we're going to have here. So, Johnny, we'll start off with you. Give us the first entry in your Mount Rushmore of underrated films and or franchises.
Sure. So this is a franchise, and I'm going to include all the films in the franchise for completion's sake, even though not all of them really fit the bill. But that's sort of a cross section of the franchises that I've chosen. I'm going with the Superman franchise, specifically the Christopher Reeve quadrilogy, which I think is a word that 20th Century Fox made up to sell Alien box sets, but that's fine. Superman, the movie, Superman, the motion picture, or just Superman, I don't know what you want to call it, with Marlon Brando, Gene Hackman, Christopher Reeve, and others, is such an amazing piece of cinema. It's so funny because people think about the comic book film genre, and people always say, well, it had that sort of haze where people made the movies and they started to become profitable, and then finally you get Nolan in here and he takes it seriously. And I'm always like, wait a minute, did you see how seriously Richard Donner took Superman, and then to another extent his version of Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut? These movies, I mean, it's The Godfather. In terms of, I mean, they're written by Mario Puzo, for God's sakes. There is not one wink at the camera in the first two films at all. Now, the second film, of course, if you watch the Lester version, it's a little more what have you. And then Superman 3, I unapologetically love Superman 3, okay? I really do. I love Richard Pryor. I love the nonsense. I love when Richard Pryor gets drunk and wears the giant cowboy hat. All right? I would pay money to watch that scene. I think it's so funny. Superman 4, not so much. But my main point is that we're in this era of like superhero fatigue, and I know The Flash made a lot of people think about Christopher Reeve. It made me think about it, and I rewatched Superman and Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, and my God, you will believe a man can fly. That was cheesy, but I believe it. I'm done.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think, especially in the last couple of years, because I know the DC films have kind of gotten maligned these last couple of years, with just some of the decisions made and everything. And I think it has made a lot of people more nostalgic for that original Superman franchise. I mean, when most people think of Superman, the first guy they think is Christopher Reeve, because he made that character so synonymous with film back in the late 70s and early 80s. And and like I said, Gene Hackman was Lex Luthor, and the films did could argue they got a little bit worse as time went on, and they didn't 1 and 2 were kind of the ones more held in high regard. But like I said, I think just with what's been released in the last couple of years, it's given fans a little bit more of appreciation of those original films. So Chad, did you have anything else to say about the Christopher Reeve Superman films?
No, I've only seen the first 2, which from the comments you guys had, that may be a good thing. But I came way late to these. Like, I was well into my teenage years. I think when the first 2, the Richard Donner cut or whatever, came out on DVD, I got that as a gift for Christmas or something one year, and so that was the first time I really sat down and watched, whenever that was. But definitely not something of my childhood, so not something I'm nostalgic about, but really enjoyed the first 2. Just never kind of ventured for, because Superman's never kind of been my superhero of choice. So
it's not. It's interesting because it's not. I grew up watching it, and I guess I do have a little nostalgia for it. But I 2 points I just didn't make, and I just want to do it real quick. Is that especially Superman 1? It doesn't hold back. It doesn't assume that everyone watching is a 7-year-old child. And that's really important. The Williams score is amazing, and yeah, I could that ending still gets me. But it's not my preferred version of Superman, ironically enough. But I think Superman 78 is just unbelievable.
There is a small tie-in where you mentioned the John Williams version. So I went to the University of Georgia. Even when I went there, and still to this day, when they go to the fourth quarter, they everybody holds up the 4 fingers, for the fourth quarter. The band plays Krypton, and the crowd synchronizes like the 4 to the da, 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 which is really cool. And now in the past couple of years, the stadiums went through a lot of renovations, and they've got all new like LED lighting system and stuff. So the lights go completely out. Everybody turns their cell phone light on, and they have kind of like red LED lights in the cell phones, and it's awesome. It's worth looking on YouTube to that Krypton at UGA. It's an awesome moment.
Well, I'm glad they picked that song, because that's actually, everybody knows the Superman March, but the planet Krypton that's such a sick needle drop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Chad, we'll now go to you. Give us the first entry in your Mount Rushmore of underrated films and/or franchises.
This was tough. These lists were tough for me, because I think this is something that's kind of through your own prism, and we're in different chats where certainly these movies that I picked kind of came up more often than not, or on the underrated list don't come up as much. So I picked a franchise. My first pick I'll talk about is one that just had an entry that came out, and I think all the movies are held in high regard. But at this point, I really think it's the best action franchise in cinema history, and that's Mission Impossible. The first one I did watch as a kid. My parents took me. We were at the beach, and I went and saw it, and absolutely confused the crap out of me. I can really vividly remember being totally confused on what was going on with the knock list and the computer lingo and whatnot. But as I go back and watch it, it's a clever movie that for its time was state of the art. Mission Impossible 2 is what it is. It's has some stylistic choices from John Woo. I think easily the worst of the entry. I wouldn't go as far to say it's a bad movie, but not great. I'm not going, die on that hill. Mission Impossible 3, I think's kind of forgotten about overall. Really strong Philip Seymour Hoffman um, character arc, and he's probably the strongest villain actually throughout the franchise. And then, it was dormant for a few years and came back with Ghost Protocol, and they have that scene in Dubai that's just a great set piece of action. And then it just, it's knockout blow after knockout blow. I love Rogue Nation. I think Fallout is up there with Mad Max Fury Road as my favorite action movie period from probably 2010 through current. And then the last movie that just came out this year, it's probably my fourth or fifth favorite in the entire franchise, but a very strong entry into the series. The train action sequence, the final 30-40 minutes, is a great action set piece, and it brought a lot of things into motion for part 2 that comes out next year, which I can't wait to see. So I love the Mission Impossible series. I think the team of Ethan and Luther is just a great kind of team up, and everybody has their specialized role. And just overall, I love it. I mean, to me, it's a less, I guess, problematic James Bond. And I still like a lot of James Bond movies and franchises, but and entries. But I just think Mission Impossible so far, besides Mission Impossible 2, is just banger after banger and continues to set the bar for exciting action movies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this has always been kind of like an interesting franchise for me. I mean, you pretty much could say this is what made Tom Cruise into an action star. And
Yeah.
I remember, I don't remember a ton about those first 3, but I do remember I was working in movie theaters when the 4th one came out, when Ghost Protocol came out, and it, like you said, it did really good. And it seems like, every couple of years, I think one of the things they've done a really good job is releasing all these films, every few years, so that it doesn't feel overkill. Because just looking at specifically these last 4, they're all over 90% on Rotten Tomatoes in terms of critical approval, and obviously the cinema scores are good for them as well. So, say what you will about Tom Cruise, but the guy knows what sells, and him as he is synonymous with being Ethan Hunt, and he is synonymous with this franchise, and it is going to be interesting to see how part 2 of Dead Reckoning does next year, if it's able to kind of meet the same standard as these other films. But I think there's no denying that that Mission Impossible does go down as one of the biggest franchises in cinema history. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about the Mission Impossible franchise?
I do have a few thoughts about the franchise. This is just really quick, though, because Chad mentioned Fury Road. I am very colorblind, which is not like a huge deal, but if you are also, and you would like to watch Mad Max Fury Road with a different slant, check out the Mad Max Fury Road Shiny and Chrome edition, which is available for digital purchase. That is sort of a black and white version, and it's absolutely insane to watch and amazing. So, a lot like Chad, I saw Mission Impossible 1 in theaters. I did a double feature with Twister, and I was also extremely confused, especially when Ving Rhames is like, toast. I was like, I'm hungry too. Can we get some toast? I know the one with Henry Cavill is well received, although I'll never forgive it for the mustache. With the whole Superman thing. I heard nothing but good things about the latest one. I know it struggled at the box office thanks to Barbenheimer, but I stopped at 3, and I guess this is the start of the heel turn. Chad, my favorite Mission Impossible is Mission Impossible 2. The John Woo stylization, the Hans Zimmer score, the fact that it's sort of a secret Batman and Catwoman movie. Okay, a lot of people hate Dougray Scott. Like, a lot of people think Dougray Scott would have been a disaster as Wolverine. Famously, of course, Dougray Scott's supposed to play Wolverine. Mission Impossible took too long to film. He didn't get to play Wolverine. Dougray Scott steals every scene. I don't know why. There's something about this performance. I just love it. It's ridiculously over the top and mustache twirling. And I could watch Tom Cruise cartwheel into a motorcycle and grab a gun all day. I'm sorry. But I respect the franchise, but I have no feelings towards it aside from I like to a lot.
I like that. I forgot that that's what it was called. The Barbie Oppenheimer duo was called Barbie Barbenheimer. That's funny.
And the Limp Bizkit song. You cannot forget the Limp Bizkit song. Now I know. But still.
See, it's funny. My main memory with Mission Impossible 2 was the Metallica song "I Disappear," just because it was all over MTV during 2000. So that's my connection with with the second film. So okay, well, I will go ahead and give my first entry on my Mount Rushmore, and this is a film that I felt was. It did get some love when it came out, but I feel like it didn't get enough love, especially considering what it was going up against in terms of some of the other films that had come out that same year, and especially going into the awards season at that time. And that's Hacksaw Ridge from 2016. Of course, this was the film based on the life of Desmond Doss and his time in World War II. Of course, very famously, he refused to carry a weapon into battle, yet is responsible for saving the lives of anywhere from between like 50 to 100 of his fellow soldiers. It was very, very well done. Say what you will about Mel Gibson, but he's a hell of a director. Andrew Garfield played Doss to perfection. He had a really good, strong supporting cast behind him with Sam Worthington, Hugo Weaving, Vince Vaughn, and interesting anecdote for me on this one is when our theater where I live, when we were doing like a screening of it, we actually had members of Doss's family view the film, which I thought was pretty cool. So again, a film that I think deserved a lot of love. It did get a lot of love, but considering some of the other films that had come out around the same time, I think it definitely, unfortunately, got forgotten about, which is a shame because it is a tremendous film, at least in my opinion. I'm not sure if either of you two saw this in theaters or have seen it since, but I will ask Johnny, do you have anything else to say about Hacksaw Ridge?
I haven't seen it. I heard nothing but good things about it, especially Andrew Garfield's performance, and I heard a lot about it during the Garfield Renaissance when No Way Home came out. So I fully, wholeheartedly believe that it is a great film. Like I do. Like it sounds, really interesting. I love the idea of an objector, but still a contributor. I just, it hasn't happened for me yet as a viewer, but I believe you.
Hey, Chad?
Yeah, I've seen the movie. Great movie. I guess my one biggest comment from it is I did not like True Detective season 2 at all, and Vince Vaughn playing his serious role was a big detraction, a big reason why I did not like season 2 of True Detective. So I thought this was a good bounce back for him in a more dramatic role that I could get behind. So it was like, okay, I don't absolutely detest anything he does in a dramatic setting. So that was nice to see.
Was it better than him in Psycho?
That's an interesting role as well. But yeah, I think this is the strongest he is, and it's because I never got the sense of oh, this is like a funny guy trying to play a dramatic role. I've always had kind of him and Adam Sandler are the two, and Adam Sandler's been able to break the mold, for me, in Punch Drunk Love and Righteous Gems. But Vince Vaughn's been a struggle for sure, but I did enjoy him in Hacksaw Ridge.
Okay. Well, let's go back around to Johnny. Give us the next entry on your Mount Rushmore of underrated films franchises.
All right. It might seem weird at first because when the first of this franchise came out, I mean, it was talked about and also parodied to death. And I sometimes feel like parody sometimes makes us write off all of it. But I see parody as a sign of respect. Which I think a lot of people probably do. And it recently had a fourth entry. It was one of the last big films to come out during the sort of I don't know what to call this stage of the pandemic, but it was a simultaneous home release and a pandemic theater release. So I know it didn't light the box office on fire, but that is, again, another quadrilogy, the Matrix quadrilogy. Now, I don't think any time needs to be spent discussing the first one. It did what it did. Now, a lot of people don't care for the sequels. And I get where they're coming from. And I sort of was on the fence as well at first because it wasn't what I expected. But the way that the Wachowskis open the world up and sort of account for small things within the Matrix, and it's not really important, but you got the little mythology where, the villainous programs are like werewolves or ghosts, and you have all sorts of expansion of the universe with all new human characters added in, and Smith walking around as a virus, which of course, reaches a conclusion in the third one, which, yes, they spend too much time out of the Matrix. But getting to see that sort of Dragon Ball, all hands on deck, no limits battle between Smith and Neo in the pouring rain. I love the multiple Smiths. The visual imagery in the Matrix Revolutions finale alone makes that film extremely watchable for me. But I unabashedly love the fourth one. I think the fourth one is fantastic. It's a perfect example of a movie that didn't need an extra sequel way too long after the last sequel. And Lana Wachowski, God bless her, that is exactly the story she told, how it is unnecessary and sometimes completely derogatory to the legacy of art, that when you tack on one of these sequels, it devalues the original. And that's what the entire movie is about. It's genius. It is so genius. It's $150 million middle finger to Warner Brothers. And it was one of the most brilliant things I've seen in a long time. So that's sort of where I stand on it. And I feel like, with bullet time and slow motion and everything, it's like, let's not forget that the Matrix quadrilogy is really good, guys. Let's not forget that. Is it perfect? No, of course not. But it sure is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is like I said, this is a very interesting franchise. Obviously, the first one was just so revolutionary for the time when it came out. Like you said, introducing the bullet time and just all the effects behind it. Just was so it just blew your mind for that time. And I think Reloaded is not as bad as most say it is. I think it is a little bit more underrated than I think it deserves credit for. Revolutions, I can kind of take or leave with that one. And I will admit I didn't see the fourth one. I haven't had a chance to get around to that one yet. But yeah, I think just based on just the first film alone, there's a reason why The Matrix has become such a big part of of cinema, lexicon, just for how important and revolutionary it was for the time. Chad, do you want to hold off on your comments, because I know you have this as well, but you might not have it in this segment?
Correct. I'll wait for segment 2 to form my rebuttal here.
Oh, lovely. No, that and I joke. I actually can't wait to hear the other side of that. So that's pretty cool.
Okay, well, Chad, we will go back around to you. Give us the next entry on your Mount Rushmore of underrated films and franchises.
And this might be one. I don't know where Johnny stands on this franchise either, but I'm gonna pick X-Men. It was one where it kind of the superhero. I still am not a comic book reader. I've had pockets here and there with like the DC reboots that I kind of got into a few of the comics, the New 52 or whatever, and for months at a time, but it's been kind of fleeting. So in the early 2000s, when the first three big X-Men entries came out, I knew Wolverine, but I never watched the animated series. I wasn't too familiar overall with most of the characters, and I was really drawn to the series overall. In fact, I preferred it kind of as its contemporary around that time seemed to be like the Spider-Man 2 as well, Spider-Man trilogy. And I like the X-Men. I know X-Men 3 again, like it's kind of for me, it's the Mission Impossible 2 of the entry series, but I don't think it's again a bad movie per se. I don't think it's great, but it is what it is. But really, the thing for X-Men that has elevated me has been kind of the stuff starting from X-Men First Class onward. I've loved all those movies, and even Logan, which I was kind of expecting to not be as, I kind of thought, oh, this is just going to be edgy to be edgy, and had pretty low expectations for, and it's one of my favorite like comic book movies nonstop. Like it's up there with like the Nolan, Dark Knight, in that echelon for me. So X-Men is it really, if you ask me, like my go-to superhero kind of franchise where I've enjoyed almost all the entries, even the ones that are kind of maligned, I'm gonna pick X-Men.
Hmm. Yeah. I've seen obviously a bunch of the X-Men films. I actually had I didn't have the entire franchise in my honorable mentions. I did have two specifically. I just that I thought were the most underrated of them. I did have X-Men First Class. I think that is a much better film than it gets credit for. And I also did have The Wolverine. I think just after, everyone was so disappointed with Origins, that I think and then, like you said, Logan just ended up being so damn good that that I think The Wolverine definitely got forgotten. But I think it's definitely a better film that it gets a lot of credit for. I think again, this franchise kind of suffered towards the end, as we were, because they were kind of the victims of when 20th Century Fox was bought out by Disney, and then obviously we know Apocalypse and Dark Phoenix were not that good, and I don't know how many people did see the New Mutants in 2020, but it'll be interesting to see what Disney ends up doing with the X-Men going forward. But I definitely think as a whole, I could see why the X-Men series could be considered underrated. And in fact, Johnny also had it on his Mount Rushmore of underrated franchises.
Yeah. So I grew up on the X-Men cartoon and X-Men card sets, collectible card sets, got me into comic books. And that opened an entire gateway for me. I saw the first film 5 times. X-Men United, I think, is one of the best comic book movies, period. X-Men The Last Stand, I don't like. X-Men First Class is tremendous. Underrated Kevin Bacon there. But it still sort of suffers from problematic things like, and this is for the entire X-Men franchise. When I put X-Men franchise, I didn't even think about the 3 X-Men movies and the 2 Deadpool movies and shit like that. I was just thinking movies that are called X-Men. Of course, Dark Phoenix doesn't say X-Men, but I'll keep going. Problems like misusing characters, altering characters way too much. Like the Juggernaut, for example, is not Xavier's stepbrother. He is a mutant for some reason. But specifically in First Class, when they used Emma Frost in the way that they did, I was like, damn it, because that takes Emma Frost off the table because she's a tremendous character. X-Men Days of Future Past is tremendous. If you haven't seen the Rogue Cut, I recommend it. It's even better. X-Men Apocalypse has problems. There's a few good things there. And Dark Phoenix is the worst movie with like an awesome ending I've ever seen. I love the ending of Dark Phoenix when they fight on the train, especially Nightcrawler. But this franchise it means a lot to me. I am not excited to see what Disney and Marvel do because I think they won't do it the way it should be done. The X-Men are very serious. I mean, it's a civil rights allegory. And I don't understand. I don't think they'll do it right. I don't think they'll do it justice. And if anyone out there was at one point into X-Men comics and fell off, I just recommend starting with the Jonathan Hickman Krakoa run, where the X-Men or mutant kind finally decides to say to hell with humanity and they form their own nation, and it goes from there. Because that to me, that's when the X-Men are at their strongest, when they are very, very political. And it's one thing the franchise never really overstayed their welcome with, but I would have preferred a little bit of diving deeper, but that's okay. Ian McKellen's amazing. I mean, the whole thing. Except for Gambit. Oh, they ruined Gambit. The fucking Taylor Kitsch. I don't like that guy. But whatever.
Well, if you also want another kind of opinion on the X-Men. Of course, over on the North-South Connection, Jennifer Smith just recently launched her new podcast, Exposition, with her, Tim Capel, and they'll have a certain rotating guest to talk about the X-Men franchise as a whole between everything. So be sure to check that out as well. So I'll go ahead and give my next entry on my Mount Rushmore, and this was another film that came out in 2016 along the same time as Hacksaw Ridge, and another film that was so really well done, and again just one that kind of got lost in the shuffle. Unfortunately, it's a damn shame because it's probably was one of the best movies of that year, and that's Hidden Figures. This, of course, had Taraji P. Henson, Octavia Spencer, Janelle Monáe, on top of some other big names, Kevin Costner, Kirsten Dunst. It's about a trio of African American women who are influential in helping NASA kind of grow and, and it just kind of go through, get the whole program of the space race situated. Again, it's just so brilliantly well done, brilliantly acted. Again, this was, like I said, a film that came out during the same time as Hacksaw Ridge, and considering some of the other films that came out during that same time, which I may talk about probably in the next segment, I feel like this film, unfortunately, like I said, got forgotten, and which again is a shame because it is a fantastic film, and it's definitely one that I think is worth seeking out if you've not seen it. Again, I don't know if either of you two have seen it, but I will ask anyway if either of you have anything to say about Hidden Figures. Johnny?
So I haven't seen the film, and I absolutely I think it's a great thing that the film's out there. I'm so happy it got a positive response and was somewhat financially successful as well. I hope it has an endearing legacy, but and it's not really historical films. It's just I don't know, for some reason for the last couple of years I just have not sat down and watched real movies. Just popcorn fare. And I'm making a list, actually. This whole conversation's, wanting me to get back on the horse of actually watching some cinema. So I'll put this on the list because I've always heard great things about it.
Yeah, it's definitely one worth checking out. Chad?
Yeah, ditto. 2015 through, I would say, 21 is a bad phase for dramatic movies that I happen to catch because it's the kid phase for me. So when you have newborns and stuff like that, you're not there's just there's a lot of good movies I know that are highly revered from those years that I haven't seen. I have a list for me.
Yeah, that was one of the good things for me about working in the movie theaters is that I got to see the movies for free. So I definitely tried to see as many as I could. So, all right. Well, Chad, we'll go back around to you. Give us the next entry on your Mount Rushmore of underrated films or franchises.
So mine again's another franchise, and this one is near and dear to me, and it's Toy Story. I'll say all four. Now, I'm told X-Men and Mission Impossible do have two movies in those entries that I don't hate, but didn't think they're really good. I can kind of see some cheesy appeal for some of those. I mean, I do think Toy Story 4 is a good movie, a really good movie actually, with a nice coda. Now, as we record this, they've just announced apparently they're doing Toy Story 5, which, enough's enough. I also don't include Lightyear in this entry because that was a whole different thing, different voice actor for Lightyear and Buzz and all this. But the first three Toy Story entries, I mean, I can make an argument for them that those three are in my top, I don't know, 6, 7 animated movies of all time. All three of them. Toy Story 3 is actually my favorite of them. And then Toy Story 2 and Toy Story is number 3. All of them, if I ranked on a 100-point scale, they're 98 to 100. I love all three of those movies. I think they each bring a different vibe. It just, Toy Story, the original, has the nostalgic value for me. But Toy Story 3, I loved what they did with Lotso. I think he was such a unique character that when you look at Pixar's trajectory around that time, you had kind of Ratatouille, Wall-E, and Up was their 2007, 2008, 2009 movies. And then 2010 was Toy Story 3. So with Ratatouille, Wall-E, and Up, those are great movies. But there's not that appeal really for a lot of like the kids, younger audience. I don't believe my kids to this day. My oldest is 8. He still cannot sit through Wall-E. Like it just does not happen yet. Up, I like, and the opening scene is very emotional and it pulls at the heartstrings. But again, not going to be one of their go-tos. But Toy Story 3 has always, to me, been able to meld that generational thing where adults can appreciate it, the characters have a good complexity to it, but it's also a good entry point for the younger audience too. So I love the first 3 movies so much. And like I said, Toy Story 4, still really good. Like don't think it's very 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 good movie as well. So Toy Story franchise, to me, easily the best animated franchise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I personally would never have consider Toy Story underrated because I think it does get the proper love that it deserves. The first one was so revolutionary for being like the first, computer animated, 3D film. Then 2, like I said, 2 just had a lot of great storytelling, great character builds, and then 3 was the perfect send off, I think, for the film. I agree. I think 3 is my favorite of the 3. And I do agree 4 is a good film too, but I think a little bit unnecessary. And I just literally saw about, like you said, about 5, which I mean, I don't know at this point if they should. I mean, I don't know what they're thinking over there doing a 5th one. It's completely unnecessary. And then, and then like I said, probably the less said about Lightyear, the better. But when you look at Pixar, there's definitely no question that their franchise series is always going to be Toy Story, just for what it was able to do for when it came out. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about the Toy Story franchise?
Well, I think what they're thinking with making a 5th one is that the Dial of Destiny only made like $135 million, so they need to recoup some funds quickly. I mean, I agree. I think these films are uniquely under and overrated. I'm going to take the middle ground here. I think they're underrated, or excuse me, they're underrated in a way that there's a generational gap in some way, shape, and form. And like Chad mentioned, this is especially the third one, is a tremendous film for adults. I mean, I would argue it might be who it's for in some way, shape, or form. It's almost therapeutic in a lot of ways. That last scene is tremendous. And I'm due for a rewatch of the third one too, with the whole Barbie Renaissance. Like, I want to go back because that's where they introduced Barbie and Ken, right?
Yes,
yeah,
the second one.
In 3. Yep.
Okay, gotcha. With like Michael Keaton and everything like that.
Yeah, it's when they go to Sunnyside.
That's right. And is Lotso Kelsey Grammer or Ned Beatty? I don't know why. I don't know. I can't remember.
Kelsey Grammer.
Oh, Niles. All right. But no, the third one's tremendous. I like the second one a lot. The first one I haven't watched in a long time. It might look like a screensaver, but I don't really.
Ned Beatty. You're right. I don't
know.
Oh,
it was Ned Beatty? Okay.
Yeah, it was. Yep.
Well, he's Otis from Superman, so we've got brand synergy, pal. But no, Toy Story's great. Toy Story's great. It's underrated from a certain segment of age groups who think it's just a kid movie. That's sort of where I was going with that. But yeah, it's great. I mean, not an unkind word to say. I do have a question. Did they do Inside Out the year after this?
No, Inside Out was 2015, so it's 5 years later.
A few years down the road. Yep.
Because that's my favorite like Pixar flick. But because the emotional maturity chart, they definitely hit like a peak there at some point where it was like they're quality films, period. So
yeah, Inside Out to me was a good kind of bounce back, because they'd had. I probably like Monsters University better than most, but when they had it and Brave after Toy Story 3, it was kind of, some of the mid to low entries. And then, Inside Out was also in development at the same time as Good Dinosaur, which is
Oh,
which actually is one of the Pixar movies I've watched the most. My oldest son, I think, was the only person that loved The Good Dinosaur, so we watched that a ton when he was like 4 and 5.
I have
But
that
yes,
with
not
Brother
great.
Bear. I would never have
Yes,
watched Brother Bear, but my daughter was right place, right time for it, I guess.
right.
Yeah, no, I love Inside Out, and I like what you mentioned earlier. It's like Toy Story 3. I feel like was there specifically for those that were kids for the first Toy Story in '95. I think that was I think because by the time Toy Story 3 came out, those kids that watched Toy Story when it first came out in '95 were now adults. So
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's great symmetry there. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely in a sweet spot age range for that. I mean, a 9 when the first Toy Story came out, and 24 when Toy Story 3 came out. So was just gotten married in the prior year or so. So it was certainly like one of those like moving on with your life and growing up. So everything kind of came full circle.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and give my next entry, and we're going to stay on the animated film train here, as I'm going to flip over to Disney specifically. And one of their probably most underrated films, in my opinion, it's one I really enjoyed the first time I watched it. And I think because it comes off after, arguably the three greatest films that they've ever done. And that's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Came out after, like I said, you had Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King, were so great, and then Pocahontas was it was okay, but could definitely step down. And I think they actually definitely bounced back big time with Hunchback. The imagery is amazing. You have one of the greatest villains in Disney history with Frollo. Some good songs, good voice casting, and it's funny when it first came out in theaters. I didn't watch it in the theaters. I didn't see it the first time in its entirety until I did my wonderful reviews of Disney a couple of years ago, and I was just amazed with how well it's held up over these years, and how good of a movie it was. And I think when you think about underrated Disney films, this is definitely, I think, probably for most, at least for me, I know for me at least, is near the top, I think, of ones that you don't immediately think about as being a great Disney film, but I think is definitely has definitely aged well over time, I think. So, Johnny, do you have anything to say about The Hunchback of Notre Dame?
I love you for putting this on the list. This is the best Disney film. It really is. I love this. Well, I mean, I love the Disney and Renaissance classics. Like, I grew up with them. Like, I have much respect for them. They're not at the top of my list in terms of things I'm going to randomly put on, but Hunchback is so good when you look at those films. It really is. It has the gentleman who plays Judge Frollo is amazing. Tony, he's in Twins. I don't know. He's in a ton of stuff. Kevin Kline is great. Tom Hulce is great. Some of the songs are hit or miss. I love Out There. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I sound like a giant nerd, but it's really, really good. I would say it's this and Atlantis. I really like Atlantis. But of the musicals, Hunchback is by far the most underrated.
Yeah, that's Tony Jay is the actor who played Frollo, by the way.
Okay, Tony Jay, yeah.
Okay. Chad, obviously the fellow Disney aficionado, do you have anything else to say about Hunchback?
Yeah, second Out There, one of my favorite Disney songs, period. Hunchback, I think, is one kind of similar to what you were saying, Steve. It's one I've appreciated later on. I've really, along with Toy Story, like you mentioned, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and Lion King are three of my other all-time favorite animated movies. So I remember as a kid when Pocahontas, Hunchback, Mulan, Hercules, when those movies came out, I was kind of like, oh, I'm too old for this. It kind of gave them the bad rap. My brother's 4 years younger than me, so we watched all those movies in the theater, and I was a little too cool for school. But as I've went back and watched them later on in life, I've certainly gained an appreciation for them. especially Hercules and Hunchback. Those were the two that I think have really raised in my eyes as far as where they slate overall in the Disney canon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I'd probably throw Mulan in there as well.
Yes.
So, okay. Well, Johnny, you have one entry left on your Mount Rushmore, so why don't you go ahead and give it to us?
Just because I'll never have a forum to say about it again. Mulan and Pocahontas were my daughter's go-tos, and oh my goodness, I can sing them with my eyes closed. All right, here we go. So my last one is probably where a lot of people turn this thing off, but I want to preface this by saying I promise I will not get mad, angry, yell, or make fun of you on Twitter and say that you're, stupid or something like that. And I don't endorse those tactics from the people that often talk about these films, by the way. But it is the DC Extended Universe series of films with a special emphasis on the 3 ones directed by Zack Snyder. I absolutely and I absolutely understand why people don't like these movies, but we talked about Christopher Reeve Superman earlier, and he's rescuing cats out of trees, and that's tremendous and fantastic, and I think it has a place. I love comics like that sometimes, but I appreciate how what they did with Superman was they made him the most frightening thing on the face of this earth. Not because of what he does, but because of how he changes everything. He is literally a god among us. And then you move on to the portrayal of Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne, who was absolutely fell off the rocker 5 years before the movie even starts. And Affleck plays that so well, pulling from, I think, his some sort of real life experiences he's going through at the time with his alcoholism and divorce and what have you, and just creates an absolutely perfect version of a Bruce Wayne who has completely lost it. And then you go to the Snyder Cut of the Justice League, and all of these themes come to a head. It's a 4-hour long film. I know that sits unwell with people. I love it because it gives us the time that we need to focus on everything. Is everything perfect in these 3 films? No. But when you look at the score, the cinematography, and the caveat icing on the cake is this is how I always wanted to see this segment of superheroes on the big screen. Marvel is about everyday people dealing with extraordinary circumstances, and the DC universe is a world where gods walk among us, and we are lucky that they let us. So, and then the other films are hit and miss. I'm not going to talk any longer, but because it's really those 3, I get it. If you don't like them, I get it. But I hope with me giving you this little spiel, it makes sense why I like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think just because, by the time, when Man of Steel came out in 2013, Marvel had already established the MCU so strongly, and especially after the year before when the Avengers did so well, DC had there was not going to, it was going to have a tough hill to climb anyway. And like you said, this franchise, this universe is so much different from the MCU. It does feel like much darker, a lot grittier. And, I'll unabashedly say I liked Dawn of Justice when it first came out. I know a lot of people were not high on it, but I didn't mind it. I didn't mind Suicide Squad, the first one. I love the first Wonder Woman. I think that's one of the best ones of that franchise. I liked Justice League when it first came out. I haven't had a chance to see the Zack Snyder cut yet. I know that's on my short list. And I haven't seen a lot of the more recent ones that have come out. Like I didn't see Black Adam. I didn't see Flash. I know we have the current one, Blue Beetle, out. That's getting some good traction right now. But yeah, I think everyone spent too much time trying to compare this to Marvel and the MCU when it was trying not to be like the MCU and it was trying to be something different. So I think maybe in a couple more years when we look back and we kind of rewatch these films in a different lens, maybe we'll see them as good films and as a good universe. So I definitely am on your side on this one. I think it is underrated as a whole. Chad, do you have anything else to say about the DC Extended Universe?
No, this was an honorable mention for me. I, in general, have enjoyed most of the entries in this series. I think most of them are good popcorn fodder. Ultimately, why I didn't add it to my Mount Rushmore is there's not the one kind of entry or film or character that has multiple movies within the extended universe that I've loved all the entries in. But yeah, I mean, with everyone, like even like Black Adam, Blue Beetle, and even The Flash. Like I watched The Flash from this year, and I mean, is it going to be one of my top 10 movies I watched this year? No, but I in general like enjoy it, and I do think that may be where not having that comic book attachment or whatever may help me, where I can kind of just take the movies at surface level and don't have these expectations of what the characters should be because I have such knowledge and history with these characters. So that could be helped certainly, but yeah, overall, to me, a fun. I mean, I would categorize it as a fun franchise.
Can I just mention Aquaman really quick because I didn't. I love the Aquaman film. It's so much fun. It's Final Fantasy underwater. It's Star Wars underwater. In the way that it is very whimsical and it just feels like its own thing that you can just sort of sit back, kick back, and relax and enjoy. I'm done. I go all day.
Yeah, no, I agree. Aquaman too. Aquaman was a good film as well. I think just because of the fact that the whole Amber Heard controversy, I think kind of maybe puts that film in a bad light. But that's.
I know this isn't. I can't. I don't understand that with people. I don't understand. Everyone's opinion is valid and it's true to themselves, but at the same time, it has nothing to do with the film. Mm-hmm. As it stands.
Right. No, I definitely agree. All right, Chad, you got one entry left on your Mount Rushmore, so go ahead and give it to us.
Yeah. So this entry, I was struggling. I wanted to do franchises, and I kind of wanted to put, I guess, a more whimsical pick as my fourth entry. So I landed on Rush Hour. The buddy cop genre seems like something that's definitely out of style nowadays, but it was pretty relevant when I was a kid and a teenager, and I remember fondly like loving the first Rush Hour movie and watching it constantly. It was a multiple movie theater experience for me, and then just one that kind of when it comes on TNT or whatever at midnight, you're winding down. It's always good to throw on. And 2 and 3, they double down and triple down on kind of that formula, and most of those kind of get progressively more maligned in the critical reviews. And I would probably say Rush Hour 1's the best in the entry. Especially than 3, but I still enjoy all 3 of them, and I can throw them on. And again, I'm not going to be, overall emotionally invested, but to me, these are all 3 kind of cool buddy hangout movies that you can throw on, just pass the time with. It could be in the background, or it could be as you're falling asleep, and I kind of wanted to represent that as one of my Mount Rushmore entries. So that's where I landed on Rush Hour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I do remember seeing at least the first 2, and I thought they were good little films. I think Chris Tucker and Jackie Chan have great chemistry together as the the mismatched partners. So I think they definitely bring a lot of good chemistry together. Didn't see the third one, and apparently there is a fourth one in the works. We'll have to see how that one ends up going. But yeah, I mean, I don't have as much of a connection with this one, I think, as you do. But I can definitely see why you would put it on your Mount Rushmore. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about Rush Hour?
Yeah, I love Chris Tucker. It's so funny. I'll never have another forum to talk about this. Back in '97, I went to a special sneak preview of Money Talks with Chris Tucker and Charlie Sheen. I saw it like 3 weeks before it came out. I saw Spawn, and they're like, "Hey, just for you. We're here's stay after the New Line Cinema presents Money Talks, and of course seeing him in Friday when that came out. But Rush Hour 2 was like a dorm room movie. Everybody on my dorm had Rush Hour 2, and I saw it so many times my freshman year of college, and that's the one that stands out for me as humorous. I love when they do Michael Jackson, and Chris Tucker says, "Come on." It makes me laugh pretty hard. Other than that, I don't really have an attachment to it, but it'd be nice if the buddy comedy came back. So, and I totally get where Chad's coming from with the movies I would fall asleep to, or movies that are just on because you have to write a paper or something, or do something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I will go ahead now and give my final entry on my Mount Rushmore, and this is a film that. Again, when you talk about when the year came out, it did do very well, and it definitely at the time got a lot of love. But I think it's kind of fallen off the wayside, and I think even to this day, it does still hold up extremely well, especially for the genre. And that's District 9. It was an amazing film when it came out. You have this thing where it's like, it's an alien film, a sci-fi film, kind of done in the almost pseudo the first person perspective. The story itself is really good. These aliens are kind of cornered off in this little South African ghetto. They're obviously being discriminated against, and it's just such a really intense film. It was Charlton Copley. It was his breakout. It was that you forget that Peter Jackson had a hand in it with producing, and it just I just remember watching it when I watched it the first time in the theaters, how blown away I was with how incredible of a film it was. And I know that Neil Blomkamp has gone on to do some other he's done some other decent films, but nothing I think as in my opinion has topped this one. So I definitely wanted to give this a nod for being a very great underrated film. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about District 9?
That's so funny. The first thing that comes to my mind when you mention it is a red box, because I did not get to this in theaters, and this was like a big movie that I kept waiting to come out on Redbox. And every time I went to the store, someone had seemed to have rented. But when I finally got my hands on it, I really enjoyed it, and I have not actually seen it since. Every time I see Neil Blomkamp's name, I'm like, oh, that's the guy who directed District 9. Let's see what this is. And every time I feel like I've been more and more less interested. Coming to a ramping epic conclusion with Gran Turismo from this year, which I did not see, but when I saw he directed it, I was like, oh, so he's just given up now, and he's just taking movies for the money.
Yeah. Chad?
Watched District 9 once, right when it first came out. Enjoyed it, but haven't seen it since then. And, it's kind of one of those that came and went just because it's been so many years for me.
But yeah, good mention of former WWE guest host for Monday Night Raw, Charlito Copley, there, man.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I think it was right when the 18 came out was when he did the guest host spot. So,
yeah, it was him and Rampage Jackson, formerly of TNA Impact Wrestling, and Bradley Cooper for a few minutes.
The guest host era. What a time for Monday for Raw. All right, well, that will wrap up our main list, but let's now talk about any honorable mentions we might have had. Johnny, do you have any other film franchises you want to talk about?
Yeah, specifically, I wanted to mention this one. I caught my kid watching. I guess I'd call it not caught him like in a bad way, but I walked in the room and he's watching the first one of the remake series, and I sat down and watched it, and then started talking to him about which ones I recommend and don't recommend and what have you. And I was like, God, this franchise is so good, but no one really talks about it, and that's Planet of the Apes, and that includes the original 5 and the 3 that have come out since. Last 2 of the recent ones directed by the Batman's Matt Reeves, so that's kind of cool. And I love the original. I recommend the first, the third, and the fourth. Specifically the fourth. I enjoy the fourth one quite a bit. That's the one where Caesar leads the revolt, Conquest, I believe, and you get a little bit of Ricardo Montalban as well. But I just feel like, aside from the twist having a huge part in our society, like, as a thing, like, damn you, the Statue of Liberty, etc. Like, I get that, but it kind of goes past that, and it's really interesting. And how I almost said Peter Dinklage, for God's sakes. What is his name? Gollum. Why am I blanking? This should not happen on
Andy
Fox.
Serkis.
Okay, Andy Serkis should have won a damn Oscar for the second one. I just don't understand why that can't be considered a performance. It's kind of rude. But I just, I'm not going to die on a hill for it, but I really think Planet of the Apes needs some love.
Yeah, and I definitely agree on the recent trilogy. I think, like I say, Andy Serkis was tremendous. I mean, but if they want to give him an Oscar for his performance as Gollum in The Lord of the Rings, you knew they weren't going to give him any love for his role as Caesar. But I definitely agree with you on that one. Chad, I know you mentioned already the DC Extended Universe, but did you have any other honorable mentions you wanted to talk about?
Like I said, I stuck on the franchise side of things, but I'll say the one movie standalone that I will kind of give my spiel for, and it's highly regarded. It's critically acclaimed, but probably the most invested in a Best Picture race for the Academy Awards that I've ever been was in 2007. And that was the year No Country for Old Men and There Will Be Blood came out. And No Country for Old Men, of course, won. And I think that's a great movie. But I think There Will Be Blood it's one of my top 10 favorite movies, and I think best movies of all time. Daniel Day-Lewis's performance kind of gets projected, and by all means, it's amazing. But just the movie in of itself, I think, is so gripping and intense, and I like the finish of the ending of There Will Be Blood much better than kind of how No Country for Old Men sort of dissolves and just says, well, everything sucks. Just in how it kind of gives that anecdotal ending with Tommy Lee Jones talking about his dreams. It is what it is. So I'll give a shout out to There Will Be Blood as a underrated movie that is a great movie. It's not just a powerful Daniel Day-Lewis performance.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you on that one. I had a couple of other ones. I already mentioned Wolverine and X-Men First Class. Another Disney movie that I think is extremely underrated is The Rescuers. I really enjoy that film, and Rescuers Down Under is always one of my favorite films growing up. So I do have that little connection there. I know you, Chad, mentioned Brave is a weaker entry, but I've always loved that. Really enjoyed that film. I think it's slightly underrated in my opinion. I don't think it's on the same level as Toy Story. As the Toy Story first three are definitely not Inside Out, but I don't think it was I think it was still fairly solid entry. Another film I had, kind of a coming-of-age film that I think doesn't get talked about enough, and that's The Edge of 17. I believe that came out in 2015, if I remember correctly, but it was with Haley Steinfeld and Woody Harrelson. I thought that was, for me, not a big fan of those type of films. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really well-done film. And then one more animated film I had on here that was just, unfortunately, a victim of, again, timing, and that's Frankenweenie. I really liked the film. I think it was really well done. Seeing that stop motion animation, was really beautifully done. Unfortunately, it came out around the same time the first Hotel Transylvania came out, and Hotel Transylvania got so much pub and so much play that it kind of it took the win out of Frankenweenie sales. So I think Frankenweenie deserved a little bit more love than it ended up getting. So, but those are some of the other ones I had. All right, well, we'll go ahead now because that wraps up for this first half here. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to flip the script and talk about our overrated films and franchises. And I think this is going to generate a lot of good discussion. This is Making Mount Rushmore here on the PTB Pop Experience, and we will see you on the other side of this break. And we're back on Making Mount Rushmore here on the PTB Pop Experience. I am Steve Riddle alongside Jonnie Sea and Chad Campbell. We are talking movies and franchises. We, of course, in our first half talked some of our underrated films and franchises. And now for the second half here, we're going to be talking about films and franchises we think are overrated. This is, I think, like I said, going to generate a lot of good discussion because I think we're going to have some very interesting entries of films and franchises that are seemingly loved by almost everyone, but for whatever reason we don't. We may not feel the same way as everyone else does. And I will go ahead and kick things off here with one of the only franchises I actually came up with between my two lists, and this is a franchise that I never was able to get into. I still to this day do not know the appeal behind it. And I was just going to say it's the Fast and Furious franchise. Ever since the first film came out in 2001, it just never interested me. I never saw the appeal. I know everyone, a lot of people love the franchise. I know, obviously, there's big names in it. And I know that when, that after Paul Walker, tragically passed away when he did, that it kind of, it brought some sentiment for a lot of fans. But I don't know, just for whatever reason, it just never appealed to me. Just the idea of a racing, being a racing film, and then by the time you got to the middle of the series, between the fifth and sixth ones, then it kind of transitioned to being just generic action films. Obviously they do very well. They make a lot of money, especially overseas, but I don't know. I just think this is one franchise that I think just gets too much love, and I just do not see the appeal behind it. It might be in the minority, but that's just me. Chad, do you have anything to say about the Fast and Furious franchise?
Yeah, not one that I'm very fond of either. To me, the whole franchise, I can't. It's obviously preposterous, but it's a franchise that I don't know whether the creators and the biggest fans of the franchise are kind of in on the joke or don't know. It's one I'm a little confused about. I did see the latest entry that came out this year in 2023 just because of my Regal movie pass, and it was preposterous. Most of the set pieces, even with action, you have to generally kind of roll your turn a blind eye to a lot of logical decision making, but this even went beyond that. I think with Jason Momoa essentially given his performance as the Joker. That's exactly what he was as the villain character. So yeah, certainly not a franchise I'm too fond of.
Yeah, it just felt like, especially these last couple of films, it's just how much crazier can we go with the big big stunts, and it's like you said, it just gets to a point where it's just it becomes for a movie that is not real, it just feels way too corny. So I think that's definitely a big issue that I have with it. Jonnie, do you have anything else to say about the Fast and Furious franchise?
Yeah, this was on my list as well. And it's so funny because Chad summed it up freaking perfectly. I put this on here because I think that some people don't realize that we're laughing at them when they say that they love the Fast movies because they're great films. They don't get it, and that's what frightens me. I will say I think the fifth one is watchable, and I enjoyed Momoa's shtick because I felt like he kind of knew what he was doing. Yeah, that's it. I quit. And I like Cena in the latest one when he's with the kid, just because ever since Peacemaker, Cena sort of puts I don't know, I sort of feel like he gets it, but I don't know, I could be wrong on that too. But yeah, these movies are fucking garbage.
Yeah, yeah. That's pretty much all else needs to be said. All right, Chad, let's go over to you. Give us the first entry on your Mount Rushmore of overrated films or franchises.
So I'll give my first one, which was kind of spoiled in the first one because it was on Jonnie, first segment because Jonnie had it on his underrated. I did put the Matrix franchise on my overrated. I think my reasoning for that is the first movie I think is really good. I don't think it's as good as a lot of its biggest fans think so. So I kind of have it in the really good, not quite great category, where I think most would say that it is a great standalone movie, but really the franchise in of itself is one that I just think like, okay, that was a really good standalone movie. We could have ended it there. I just don't think we need anything else out of that. I remember the second one, Matrix Reloaded, when it came out in May of 2003. I turned 17 August of 2003. So this was one of the hardest movies I ever had sneaking into before I was 17 and was able to go without a guardian or whatever. So ended up doing it by befriending a couple strangers in front of us and them saying like they were my guardian. We snuck in on opening night, all our friends. And it was fine. Like I think with each of the sequels, there's some stylish, interesting shots. The rain that Johnny mentioned is cool looking, but everything's so sprawling. They extended the universe so much that to me, like nothing resonates. Like I have no connection to anything. 2 through 4 of those movies are all just kind of a blob of here's some cool visual stylings, where you could tell me different plot points and I can't tell you whether that's Reloaded or Revelations or whatnot. So everything's just kind of a jumbled mess to me after the first one. And yeah, that's just kind of how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not everybody's cup of tea. So I think it is kind of cool that we do have at least one franchise that one person thinks it's underrated, one thinks it's overrated. So I think that's nice little counterpoint there. So Johnny, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to retort in that. I know you said a lot in the last half.
Hey, I think those are all extremely valid points, and I've had those thoughts about this movie myself, or this franchise myself. You talked about having to sneak in. I have a similar but different story. I saw it when it came out. I was in college, and I never forget. I got out of seeing the movie. I was extremely hyped for it. My girlfriend called me, and she's like, "Hey, why don't you head over to my dorm? My roommate's gone." And I walked in, and she's like, "Hey, how's it going? My roommate's gone." And I was like, yeah, I got to think about this Matrix movie real quick. Like I had to, I was so caught up in how I felt about the film. I was like, yeah, it's cool and everything that, you're my girlfriend, your roommate's gone, but I'd like to think about the Matrix for a few minutes. It confused, but also, really, really interested me at the very same time. And then I feel like in the third one, they expand on things that they introduce in the second one when they're in the Matrix, but they waste too much time outside, and then it sort of loses me. But the fourth one's what really kicks it into gear for me. I think the fourth one is so interesting as a standalone piece of almost protest filmmaking in a way. Like it's I don't know. They're not protesting anything except the fact that the film exists. It's just so meta. Ooh, it's the word I don't like using, but you can't help but think of the filmmaking process as you're watching it, and it's brilliant to me. So that's what really makes me think it's underrated. Mainly the fourth one. So I agree with you on 2 and 3. Like I understand where you're coming from.
Okay. All right. Well, Johnny, we'll stick with you. Give us the first entry on your Mount Rushmore of overrated films and franchises.
All right. The Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I love the Marvel Cinematic Universe up to a point, and I'm not like a hater or anything like that, but I think that what they've done is hurt their business model so much that it makes it difficult to see anything that they put out now as a product worth consuming, because that's all they're giving me is a product. They're not giving me anything that has any sort of artistic merit at all, I feel like. With exceptions, Wakanda Forever was pretty good. Guardians 3 was good. We've had points. No Way Home is sort of like a a big WrestleMania style thing where it's like, yeah, it was really cool and nostalgic for it, but there's 14 matches and 3 of them are good. But looking at going through the individual list, there are only a few that I would even give the thumbs up to go ahead and watch solo because, I love comic books. I love reading big events, which would be the equivalent of the 4 Avengers movies. But the nice thing about comics is sometimes I can go back and read individual small runs and still enjoy them just as much as the event stuff. What the MCU has done is made it so I only care about the event films. I'm not going to go watch Thor: The Dark World. That's a bad example, but I'm not going to watch, Spider-Man: Far From Home. I'm not going to go watch Captain Marvel. I'm not going to go watch Ant-Man and the Wasp. I'm not going to watch Iron Man 2. I'm just not going to watch these. And that's, I could go, so that's kind of where I'm coming from with it. I'll watch every damn Disney Plus show that drops on that day it comes out. I'm not, I'm still in, but I'm just please, recognize you have problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My relationship with the MCU is I have always enjoyed the films. I remember working in the movie theater when they were starting to come out, and I remember how big of an event the first Avengers was when it came out. It was so, just insane. I do think the franchise as a whole peaked with Endgame. And I think if they had actually stopped there, I think it would have been. I don't think anybody would have been upset. It would have been, I think, the perfect send-off. I do think it has become very oversaturated, and I think COVID does deserve some of the blame for that because it really wrecked a lot of things that they had planned. But just between all the Disney Plus shows and all the extra films that have come out, it's become so hard to keep track of everything. There's just so much stuff out there, and I can understand why some people would definitely say it's overrated. If anything, like I said, just for oversaturation. So I personally would not put it on my list. I do still enjoy the films, very much so. But I definitely I definitely see the argument where some people would definitely think it is overrated, especially, like I said, now where just with the constant oversaturation of everything, it feels like too much. And it's hard. It's just too much to keep track of everything. Like I said, I think if they had just ended with Endgame, I think it would have been a perfect send-off. But Chad, I know you had the Marvel Cinematic Universe on your Mount Rushmore as well.
Yeah, I not much more to add, but I agree. I mean, it's too much. Even the best films in the series, I think, are really good. Some are great. I really like the first Guardians. I really like Winter Soldier. But it's just I think it's one of those franchises where for some now it's at a point it was so popular that it can't be nothing but overrated in my eyes, because even Infinity War and Endgame, there's people that I talk to that I'm friends with that they would say these are one of their favorite movies of all time, and that just has never been me. I've never had that type of connection to the MCU as a whole. I've enjoyed it, and they had me for a while, but now, yeah, it's too saturated now to where I'm out. I mean, I go see the movies, but that's it. And, none of the TV, I just can't do it anymore. And even the entry points of the movies that I do enjoy and I just don't like to the certain degree that the most ardent fans of the MCU overall like the films too. So it has to be overrated in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and give my next entry on my Mount Rushmore. And for me, this is an interesting one because for me, I have a thing where it's I can tolerate a bad film if it's at least entertaining and you get some sort of sick pleasure out of watching it. The absolute worst films for me are films that are just boring. And this film, when it came out, got so much love by the from critics, and I obviously wanted to see it just to kind of see what it was all about. And I honestly, I don't know why. I ended up wasting my time with it, and that's from 2016, Manchester by the Sea. It's just so boring, so dry. I'm sorry, Casey Affleck is not as good as his brother. I know Ben's got his own, detractors, but he's at least got some good stuff out there as opposed to I just don't see it with Casey. And the fact that he won Best Actor that year, the Academy Awards, over Andrew Garfield for Hacksaw Ridge, I thought was an absolute travesty. Andrew Garfield acted circles around him, in my opinion. Yeah, again, this is just so dry, so dull. I almost fell asleep during it at some point. That's how bored out of my mind I was. And again, I was still working in the movie theater, so I didn't even pay to see this film, and I felt like I wasted my time with it. So this is one I definitely would not recommend, unless maybe this is one that you'd want to fall asleep to just because of how dry and boring it is. But I don't know if either you two have seen it. But Chad, do you have anything to say about Manchester by the Sea?
Never seen it, and you didn't exactly give it the hard sell for me to seek it out. So there you go.
Yeah, I would say, definitely check out. I would say, if you haven't seen either like Hacksaw Ridge or Hidden Figures, see that before this one. Johnny?
I haven't seen it, but it cracked me up. I was like, this is interesting. I was like, oh man, he's really passionate about this. And then you bring up Casey Affleck versus Andrew Garfield. And I was like, oh, there it is. Because you spoke very highly of Hacksaw Ridge, and I could see why it might burn you a little bit extra. Is Michelle Williams in this?
She is, yes.
Yeah, she's usually pretty good. Even in Venom, she's having fun because she's making money. But I haven't seen it. I can't comment.
Yeah, I would say try to find something else before this one. So, all right. Well, Chad, let's go back to you. Give us the next entry on your Mount Rushmore of overrated films or franchises.
So similar to MCU, I think this is such a popular franchise that in my mind, just because I don't think very highly of any of the movies actually in this franchise. I there is some MCU movies I would consider great. I don't know if I'd consider any of these better than very good, and that's the Harry Potter series. I've found in my life that in general it's an easy, there's the old saying, like, you realize how young a person is if they can't remember 9/11. Well, I've realized people that are younger than me, which I just turned 37, is if they seem to have a high emotional connection to Harry Potter. I mentioned my brother. He's 4 years younger than me. He loves Harry Potter, read the books, all that series. I was older, a teenager when the first one came out, and watched the first two in the theater, again, kind of going with him as a family outing. And, they were what they were. But then I tried to read the books. I read the first 5 books, and then DNF did not finish after that. And I did make it through all the movies, and they were there. They were fine. But I understand that it's a certain age bracket as the books, and it's a coming of age where you kind of grow with the books and whatnot. But man, like I've read so many fantasy series and all that, and then you have even fantasy movies like Lord of the Rings, which I know is more advanced, but it's right there, and it's just I just can't get into it again on that emotional level. So I pick Harry Potter.
Yeah, again, I know our good friend Sean Kidd has become your best friend, because I know he despises this franchise. But I mean, I'm like you. I haven't read the books. I know my sister has. I know she definitely enjoyed them because she's a few years younger than me. I do remember seeing all the films at some point. I do remember, again, being there when they came out in theaters. Particularly the second part of Deathly Hallows was a huge event. And I mean, I did enjoy the first Fantastic Beasts film. I think that is I didn't have it as an underrated film, but that might be one for me at least. But again, if they just done that one and left it at that, I think it would have been fine. But the second one was definitely a step down, and I didn't see the third one, but I haven't heard that many good things about it. And like you said, I think as a whole, the Harry Potter franchise is one that it's based on, I think if you're a little younger, you're going to like it a lot more than if you're a little bit older. And I think it's just ones that, it's always those ones where people that read the books don't like the films because something, that they liked in the books wasn't in the films for whatever reason. And it's just, I think, going to be one of those things that it's going to always be kind of contentious when it comes to adapting books into films. But I definitely see where somebody like you would think this franchise is definitely overrated. And Johnny, you actually also had the Harry Potter franchise on your Mount Rushmore as well.
Yeah, I'll split the difference here. Like I was a person that did finish the book series and enjoyed it. It's fine. Like I'm not like, I gave that impassioned speech about the DC movies. I would never do that for any of the Harry Potter books. They're fine, whatever. But the films, it's the best example I can give to someone as a film where the events that occur on screen only happen because they happen in the book. There's no through line in these films. The films are so uninteresting, and we're all just waiting. In each film, you're kind of waiting for like the third act because you want to see how it ties into the overall story. But it's like such a slog to get through these movies. Nothing happens. They're boring, and they're not well made. I will say this: I love Daniel Radcliffe, though. I'm all for Daniel Radcliffe. He's so talented, and he makes me laugh very hard. But yeah, nothing happens in these movies. They're just boring, and they'll get an interesting idea, but they'll just breeze right past it.
It's funny you mentioned that because I remember when it was announced that they were going to split Deathly Hallows into two parts. There was a lot of pushback behind that because everyone at that point thought it was just a money grab, and it did its job because we would see going forward there would be other series that would do the same thing. So I mean, Twilight did it with Breaking Dawn. Hunger Games did it with Mockingjay. The Hobbit did it 3 times. So that ultimately set the precedent. But yeah, it's just again one of those things where it's like I think like Chad said, depending on your age, I think it's going to depend on going to affect how much you like the films or not. So. Well, Johnny, we'll go ahead and stick with you. Give us the next entry on your Mount Rushmore of overrated films and franchises.
All right, so it's kind of funny because I feel like I'm the Chad when it comes to the Matrix here, because this is a franchise where I think the first one's like, yeah, that's fun, and that was definitely a moment in time, and we were all there for it, and I'm glad it happened, and we all got to experience it and laugh and have fun. But then they made a bunch of sequels and expanded their world and mythology and really took the film way too they're like, oh, I'm sorry, Disney, this wasn't actually supposed to be a franchise. We just enjoyed this one little kitschy thing. I'm sorry, you're actually making a thing with oh no. Is that an octopus playing the piano? Oh dear. It's the Pirates series. I get it. Johnny Depp's pretty funny a little bit in the first one. Okay, that's fine. But thank you. Let's make something else. Completely unnecessary. That's it.
Short and sweet. Well, I have this as an honorable mention, and again, it was one of those things where it's like when the first film came out, there was a lot of questions behind it because it's like, how do you take a popular theme park ride and make it into a full-length film? But I think having Johnny Depp there as Jack Sparrow was definitely a major draw, and it definitely provided for a lot of the positivity behind it. But then, like you said, it just kept going and going, and it just was one of those. Again, it was just like a couple too many with this franchise, and you almost feel like Johnny Depp got pigeonholed into that kind of over the top character that he would go on to do with many of his future roles. So I haven't seen all the films. I know there is appeal behind them, but I don't know. Just I'm kind of like you. I'm not really one that's going to go out right away and watch the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Chad, do you have anything else to say about this franchise?
No, I agree. I mean, I don't think it's never a good omen for the franchise overall when honestly can't remember, is there 4 or is there 5? So you don't even know how many movies are in the series for me. And
Same.
yeah, after the first one, they really run together, and pretty much it's just Davy Jones and Barbosa, and joining the fray and whatever.
Hmm. Yeah. All right, well, I'll go ahead and give my next entry on my Mount Rushmore, and this one I'm a little scared about because I know if our good friend Miranda listens to this, she's probably going to want to fly over from the Czech Republic here to Vegas and probably give me a stern talking to. The fact that I think that one of Disney's most overrated films in their history has got to be Frozen. Um, I will just say I do like the film. I do enjoy it. I think there are some good elements to it. Um, but I do think it is a bit overrated. I know when it first came out, people were saying it's the greatest film since The Lion King, and obviously there was a lot of high expectations. It did obviously did extremely well. Um, I personally actually kind of prefer the second film over the first film. I liked a little bit more like the character development and the song choice in the second film than the first one. I know. I think a lot of my issue too is that when after the film came out, obviously "Let It Go" was everywhere. You could not get away from that freaking song. Um, Again, it's it's is it a good film? Yes. Um, when I did it for my wonderful reviews at Disney, I you'll see I actually did give it 10 out of 10 because I did think it was actually a really good film. I think it was a great film. Greatest film of all time? I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one, and I do think it does. It's only been out for 10 years now, so I think we have to wait for it to be, for a little bit longer, to see where it ends up falling in the pantheon of the greatest Disney films. So in that regard, I do find it very slightly overrated. Chad, do you have anything else to say about Frozen?
No, I mean, I'm with you. I think it's very good. I mean, we are only 10 years in, but I do think it's going to have staying power. Even as we recorded this, they kind of did a big Disney Parks reveal, and they didn't say it, but they are building some frozen lands in 2 of the international Disney parks, and they kind of hinted that it may be coming to Magic Kingdom as well, with their presentation yesterday, and I think it's here to stay. I mean, it still seems, my niece is 4, and it's just kind of went through her Frozen phase, and obviously, like, she was born after the second movie came out, so it's one that I think has some staying power, and I see it again in that great, low end great, really good category, but yeah, not an all-time animated classic for me.
Hmm. Johnny?
I might be able to give a unique perspective on this. I disagree. I think this is properly rated. But my daughter was 3 when I took her to see this, and she loved it. It was a big thing for me. I really enjoyed taking her to see it. And then, the soundtrack and the watching it at home, sort of that parent thing that you go through. Like that was the first time we ever went through it as parents. Like, oh man, she's obsessed with like an entire media franchise thing. I've never seen the second one, but the first one just sort of has that place in my heart. Like, it's good. And I haven't seen it in a long time, but that's another thing. Like with Mulan and Pocahontas, I could sing it back and forth in front. And I think where I was going with this is that for a lot of parents who were parents at the time, this was their, and I guess you could say this with any Disney movie, but this was right place, right time to start like the new Disney Renaissance. Like, oh, maybe I should show my kids the Disney movies, and stuff like that. I think that it was sort of like when Little Mermaid came out, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, you figure because right before Frozen, you had The Princess and the Frog, which I love Princess and the Frog. I think that's an incredible film. That actually, I probably could have put that as an underrated film because that doesn't get talked about enough. And also, you had Tangled, which I think doesn't get its just due. So I think, like you said, Frozen just came out. It just happened to come out at the right time, and it kind of kicked off, like you said, this new, because then we got on a string of really great films. Because after that, you had Big Hero 6, you had Zootopia, Moana,
Yep.
the second Frozen. So I mean, that was a really good stretch there for Disney. So So yeah, I mean, I definitely see where you're coming from, but I know just me personally, I do find it just a tad bit overrated. Um, okay, well, Chad, you have one entry left on your Mount Rushmore, so why don't you go and let us know what it is?
Yeah, I have one entry left. I almost just messaged you, Steve, and just wanted to generic kind of put all horror franchises. I don't know. I mean, it's so I ended up drilling it down, and I ended up picking Scream, because it's more of a contemporary. It's one that again kind of just with my time, my age, it was a fun. Hey, we're kids, 10, 11, but we're going to watch a scary movie, an R-rated scary movie. So let's watch Scream. That was the one we gravitated towards. And I've always found the first Scream to be fun again, but overall, I just think in general it's kind of a blanket for all horror franchises where I don't know if I could name a horror franchise set of movies where I think there's been more than 4 or 5 entries and the franchise has a better than 50% hit rate on good movies versus bad movies. Just going down the list, Friday the 13th, Halloween, etc. Some of your more well known. I know what you did last summer as well. So I there's just I always find them to get too contrived and in of themselves with meta. And again, I kind of relate it to the horror problem. What we talked about on the action side with Fast and the Furious is it gets so preposterous and so ridiculous that I just can't take it any serious anymore. And then I'm just not one that kind of ironically likes, bad movies or cheesy movies kind of on the surface. I mean, there's certainly some that cheesy movies and bad movies that I do like just for whatever reason, but I'm not going to be a fan like going in knowing that's going to be the case. And I think a lot of these horror franchises, have that problem. And the Scream movies, the reboots that they've done the past 2 years or whatever, the one that came out in 2022, I thought the ending was awful and too meta. And the one this year was boring. So it's not a franchise I'm very fond of, and it's one that's kind of keeps trying to reinvent itself. So that was my last pick. It's more of a generic blanket statement for the genre overall, to be honest, but specifically Scream.
Yeah, I'm obviously not a big horror fan, so I've never seen any of the Scream films. So I can't really comment much on that. I do know that, I mean, like I said, the first one did really well when it first came out because it was so. It felt like a spoof almost on the horror genre, and it felt very fresh and unique at the time. Then 2 and 3, did what they did, and then when 4 came out in 2011, it did so poor. It did so poorly. It was like. It just kind of flew under the radar that, the fact that, 10 years later, the 5th one comes out and it does so well, you almost, it was kind of mind boggling. Then, like you said, this new one came out back earlier this year and it did very well, to the point that there's now a 7th one in the works. So, yeah, this is one that, again, just for me not being a horror fan, I can't comment too much on. Again, I think it's one of those where it's like you're either going to really like it or you're really not. So, I think this is where this franchise as a whole falls into. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about the Scream franchise?
I mean, so I totally agree that some of the individual films don't exactly work as well as the others, but the first one was very special to me. I remember seeing the theater. Like, it's never been as smart as it was that first time. I will completely agree with that. And that's Raleigh. And I'm one of those people that loves a good bad movie. Like, I love the Friday the 13th film franchise. It's such a fun thing to watch. And I was kind of obsessed with Halloween for a little bit too. I don't find it as interesting as I used to. But I'd put on a cheesy bad Friday the 13th movie and fall asleep. That's kind of my jam.
Okay. Well, Johnny, you have one entry left on your Mount Rushmore, so why don't you go ahead and let us know what it is?
Well, I don't know. This one might be controversial, and I was trying to think of a way to summarize this, and I was thinking about franchises that I always hear people talk about, like how good they are, kind of like the Fast and the Furious movies. But I'm like, wait a minute, are they being ironic about this? And they're saying, oh, they know it's just dumb popcorn fun, or are they saying it like really moved them? And that's what I'm calling the MGM boxing franchise. Now, Rocky is a good film. Rocky 4 is an amazing film. But the rest of them, I don't know, I don't really care. And I will say this about the Creed films, they got a little bit better. But Creed, none of them have held on to their ideas throughout the entire film. They seem to sort of let them go by the wayside. And so these are a series of films that have good moments, but some people think they're really good. And I'm like, no, they're not really good.
Well, I think our buddy Scott Criscola would disagree with you. He's probably going to be putting his fist through the wall when he hears this, because I know he loves this series. I'll be honest, the Rocky franchise is on actually my shame list that I've not seen any of those films. I have seen all three of the Creeds. I really loved the first Creed. I think that was a great film. 2 and 3 were good, but I think they were slight steps down. And I have always wanted to kind of see the Rocky films just because I know how much they're really loved, particularly those first 4. I know 5 is hit or miss with a lot of people, and then as is Rocky Balboa. So I can't give a full disclosure on how I feel about the series because I haven't seen them all. It's like I said, they're on my list of films I definitely do want to see. But I can see how they're maybe not everybody's cup of tea. Obviously, maybe if you're not a boxing fan, obviously I've given they are pretty much Sylvester Stallone vehicles. Maybe he's not everybody's cup of tea, so I definitely can see where somebody would find them overrated. Chad, do you have anything else to say about the Rocky/Creed franchise?
I mean, for me, I would put this more in the properly rated category. For me, I enjoy the films except for Rocky 5. So I'm a fan of the films. I don't think any are amazing, but I've enjoyed all of them except for Rocky 5.
Okay. All right. Well, I have one entry left on my Mount Rushmore, and this might be another controversial one, though I think I might find more supporters for this one. What I think is probably the king of the overrated films, particularly when it did come out when it did, and that's, of course, Avatar. I remember when this film came out in 2009, at the end of 2009, it was so heavily hyped. Obviously, James Cameron by that point had already had, obviously many hits. He had, the Terminator series. He had, obviously Aliens, obviously Titanic. And this was, I think he probably saw this as his magnum opus. And I know I will say I did enjoy the film when it first came out. I thought it definitely visually looked, really cool. Storyline wise, kind of hit or miss, but I think it definitely was, fine for what it was. But the fact that it did, I think as the years have gone on, I think looking back, people find it now very overrated. Obviously, I think it was just a real vehicle for 3D because it was like heavily hyped up in 3D, and the fact that this was the first film to break $2 billion worldwide, and held that record for so long until Endgame finally surpassed it. But then, of course, this got re-released shortly after, and it took the top spot back. I will say I haven't seen the second film. I just never got around to it. And I know there's like 3 other ones in production. So we'll see how those 3 end up being. But I think, even though it was big for its time, for the time it came out, and it did set all those records, and did do as well as it did, I do think, looking back, Avatar is probably, I think, if you ask a lot of people, will say is one of the most overrated films to come out in recent memory. So, Chad, do you have anything else to say about Avatar?
I have conflicted thoughts on Avatar. Going to Pandora and Animal Kingdom, the first time in 2018, it was like, okay, like I didn't know nothing. I watched the movie when it came out in 2009, but then forgot about it. and now I'm in this really immersive world with this amazing ride and Flight of Passage. I was like, well, let me rewatch the movie to see if I missed something. So when I got home, I did watch it again, and I did appreciate it more. And I do like The Way of Water. I kind of see them though as more on the Matrix side of things for me, is like visually stunning but kind of plot and emotionally hollow a little bit. But I do like them more than I like the Matrix sequels. I think the biggest thing for me with Avatar though is, again, like, if it's the highest grossing movie of all time, one of the highest grossing movies of all time, it's just one of those things where it doesn't equate to the quality. It feels like there's a disconnect there. And to use a wrestling example, like when you think of uh, for WWE, like the highest attendance they've ever gotten for a show is WrestleMania 32, which again, there's a disparity in, this amazing financial success, and they crammed all these people into this arena to watch this wrestling show, and then the actual quality of the show that you get as the output. And the same can be said really for All Out at Wembley. I mean, I think that was a better show, but again, certainly not the best AEW show or one of the best even pay-per-views they've done. It was a good show. So that's where I think that the disconnect does come in for me with Avatar, and where I can see it certainly on an overrated list. Because, I mean, if it's one of the highest grossing movies of all time, just kind of in your head, you think, okay, this is one of the best movies of all time, right? And it's certainly not that.
Yeah, definitely. Johnny, do you have anything else to say about Avatar?
I mean, I completely agree. It's too bad, really, because I do think Cameron looks at Avatar as like his thing, and I still think Titanic is 20 times better than either of the Avatar films. I think that's his mark, that and Terminator 2. But it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay, well, that will wrap up our main list. So now let's go over any honorable mentions we might have. I will mention mine first. I already mentioned Pirates, the franchise there. Funny we mentioned Titanic. I do have that on my honorable mentions, as I do think also that's a little bit overrated. Maybe not as much as Avatar, but definitely I do think it is slightly overrated. I also have from the 2016 kind of time frame, La La Land. Again, another film that got so much hype behind it, and I thought it was a good film. I do like musicals, but again, I think it's one that maybe a little bit overrated, especially kind of looking back on it. Two other films that definitely were considered big award contenders for when they came out, but I think definitely a little overhyped and overrated. One was 2011's Drive with Ryan Gosling. Again, was one of those ones where it's like, just got so much hype behind it, mainly because of the visual style and, the fact that Ryan Gosling was kind of on a roll at that point. But I thought it was just kind of like, I didn't see the appeal. And also The Social Network. I think especially when what's going on nowadays with Facebook, I think that film's not looked back on too fondly. And I think, again, when it first came out, it just got so much hype, so much play, and again, I thought it was a good film, but definitely not one I think worth all the hype behind it. And then I did have two Pixar films on here that I think are pretty overrated, and that's both Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. I know a lot of people have those, particularly Finding Nemo, on the same level as like Toy Story and some of those other films. And while I did like both films, I definitely think they're not as good as the Toy Story films. I think there are a couple of other Pixar films that are definitely better than those ones. So I definitely think those two, and again, Finding Nemo more specifically, I feel like are pretty overrated. So, Chad, did you have any other honorable mentions you wanted to talk about, or wanted to talk about any of the ones I mentioned?
Yeah, I agree with you on Finding Nemo, by the way. So two franchises I wanted to mention as well that I almost made the list. I made Justin mad enough with the MCU putting on my list. I'll go ahead and put American Pie too. I found those to be decent to okay kind of comedies, but we're certainly not in the upper echelon of the comedies around my high school college days that I was drawn to. Like Old School, Wedding Crashers, etc. Super bad. And then the last one that I almost put was a little bit of a cheat, but I was going to say the Batman franchise from '89 to Batman and Robin. Especially the first two films. Again, this may be because I was too young to watch Batman in the theaters when it came out in 1989, but when I rewatch it, there's certain things that I like, but I just find it a little too cheesy and over the top. And the same with like Batman Returns. I know some people really love that movie. Greg Phillips is someone that comes to mind that just adores that movie and talks about it like it's being a great Christmas movie and whatnot. And I do think Batman Returns has some of the atmospheric elements that are really cool, but overall, I again put both of those. Really, Batman 1989 I barely put as good, but Batman Returns I put as good as the ceiling. So I think I'm quite under the biggest fans with that franchise overall. And again, with Batman Forever and even Batman and Robin, which gets banned, but I'd say with Batman Forever, it's kind of had a little bit of revisionist where people talk about how fun it is, and it's a movie I've never really related to and thought was way too wacky overall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't seen the first two, the like Batman and Batman Returns, that much, so I have like a solid opinion of it. I do agree. I think Batman Forever is not as bad as its reputation is, and I don't think I've seen Batman and Robin, so I can't really comment much about that one. But yeah, I would, and I do remember I saw the first American Pie, and it was okay. It had its moments, but I agree with you. I think it's one that's, especially as it got later on in future ones, particularly like American Wedding and American Reunion. I think it started getting to be a little too much. So I would definitely agree with you on that. Johnny, do you have any other honorable mentions you want to talk about?
I had the Raimi Spider-Man films on here. I mean, I think that the second one is really good, but I also think that I don't know, that there's sort of, I don't know, like I did a rewatch of them around the time of No Way Home, and I was like, I just don't know that it works for this character. That's just my opinion at the time, but I was like, people love these things, and I loved them too. Well, not the third one, but I don't know. The second one is pretty good, but I don't know. I just felt like as a whole thing, it's like, I don't know that Raimi works for that character.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because I think Raimi at that point was just mainly known as a horror guy, so the fact that he was taking on such an iconic superhero, it was an interesting notion. And I wonder if having like all those characters return for No Way Home also gave it a little bit more love. Everyone kind of remembered what they felt about those original three. So so interesting, definitely an interesting choice there, because I do remember. The first Spider-Man, did so well when it first came out, and then, like I said, the second one is, so loved by a lot of people, and the third one's kind of hit or miss. So, yeah. All right. Well, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't think Tobey Maguire is very good either. That's it.
Yeah, he's one that's he's hit or miss with a lot of people. So
I do want to bring up one more franchise, Steve, that I really deliberated back and forth on. And that's Star Wars. Nobody mentioned them throughout the podcast.
Somebody would get there.
Yeah, that one is tough for me because, again, like when I look at like the hit rate of the movies overall, there's some that I dislike so much, but for me the highs are so high that I couldn't, in good conscience, put the whole franchise on my overrated, but I could certainly hear arguments for it as well.
Yeah, there's definitely. I feel that stuff that's hitting. I think Filoni-verse stuff is overrated, because I think a lot of people have a sort of connection to growing up watching things like the Clone Wars and what have you. But when you watch them independent of that, as a person who didn't watch that, they really don't work as standalone pieces of entertainment where you can absorb the information, because they they can't reference everything. There's not enough time, and they just don't work.
Yeah. All right, well, that will go ahead and wrap things up here. We had a lot of good discussion, discussing films that we thought were overrated and underrated. Obviously, leave your opinions as well if you're listening to this. We always like to hear feedback from you guys. So let's now go ahead and talk about where we can be found on social media and any other pods we have going on. Johnny, we'll start with you.
Yeah, we just had a new episode of Multiverse of Fabulousness drop the day that we are actually recording this over on North-South Connection. Keithy and I sort of did just a conversation about, wrestling and movies and all facets of entertainment, and we saw where it would take us, and we played a couple of games as well. I think it was a lot of fun. It was a little bit of a different type of show for us, but you can find us there. And then I have my own feed as well, the new TNN, where I've honestly spent a lot of time talking about a lot of the movies that we've talked about tonight. So check that out if you're interested.
Yeah, definitely. Chad?
Yeah, at Big Boys Play WCW on Twitter. Please like and subscribe to our podcast, all of our podcasts, PTB Pop, PTB in Wrestling, as well as the North-South Connection. And also subscribe to us on YouTube, where we're trying to do more stuff visually as well, and trying to generate growth in that area. So give us a like, subscribe, comment. It really helps out.
Yeah, definitely. If you haven't subscribed yet to the North South on YouTube, definitely do so. I can vouch for you guys. You do a hell of a lot of good stuff over there. So, as for me, you can usually find me on this feed here with not just this show, but also the Video Jukebox Song of the Day and Pop Goes to Classics, where me, Andy, and Miranda are going through all the Disney animated films. Our most recent episode, we talked Dinosaur, which was it was an average film to talk about, but we will, of course, be talking about The Emperor's New Groove next, so looking forward to getting into that one. Also, on the wrestling feed, I have Extreme Resurrection with James Grunberg, where we are going through WWE's ECW from 2006 to 2010. Our recent episode, we talked the two ECWs following One Night Stand 2007, so we talked about everything pre- and post-draft, obviously the saga going on with the supposed death of Mr. McMahon, and we did sprinkle in a little bit of a tribute to recently passed away Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt, so be sure to check that out and check out everything else on that feed as well. I also can be found over on the PTB Facebook group, where we got a lot of good stuff going on over there, including our current tournament where we are determining the greatest song of the 2000s. We are over halfway through the first round. We've had a lot of good matchups so far. Big ones still to come. A lot of interesting decisions to this point. I still kind of, shake my head sometimes at some of these decisions, but that's what makes these tournaments a lot of fun, because we have a lot of differing opinions amongst the nation. So if you want to get in a vote, and you're not a member of the group, let us know. We'll bring you in, and you can get in a vote. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you both for joining me. This was a lot of fun, and look forward to talking about what our topic will be next month. So for Jonnie Sea and Chad Campbell, I am Steve Riddle. This has been Making Mount Rushmore on the PTB Pop Experience, and we will see you next time.